This just in, Raid Wing number 8 has been confirmed for Guild Wars 2. Hi everyone and welcome on back to the channel. I'm KROOF and welcome to some more coverage for Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. Before we progress, I would like to tell you that you can pre-order your copy of Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds right now by using one of my links down below in the description. Any and all support truly means the world to myself and this channel, so I can continue to bring the content to you all. While you're down there, like, comment, and subscribe because it greatly helps the channel out. So let's get into the topic of Raid Wing number 8 for Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. It's been about 5 years since we've received the last raid for Guild Wars 2, and the game is in such a different place than it was back then. Back in the day, raids were the be-all and end-all of endgame content, and they were exceptionally challenging. But over the years, with better improvements and implementation of systems such as the Emboldened system, and just general power creep in the game, those raids are now more accessible to players, and with it, more people are able to experience them, gain some knowledge, gain access to the story, and now we have been in an era where strike missions have kind of been the go-to for endgame content, along with fractals. But now they're returning to raids after 5 years. And what that might mean for the game and how they end up feeling in contrast to the old raids might be substantial. Back in the day, raids used to have a more proper aggro system where toughness tanking was usually a thing. Your boss that you were fighting would aggro onto the player with the highest toughness. But then they started to play around with different factors, such as it would aggro to the furthest player or the player that is holding a specific item. And they really kept it interesting when it comes to how the bosses interact with players. But over the years, bosses in Guild Wars 2 have remained stagnant. They do not move. They are stationary. I think stationary is a better word because they're not necessarily stagnant. They try to push the molds of mechanics, but they are very stationary. And they have become more so dances of choreography, which I think most raids and games are. But with the lack of needing to understand movement or position the boss, it really is just knowing how to DPS and how to interact with the certain mechanics that are triggering in the fight. And I don't know if we're going to enter yet another endgame cycle where the endgame bosses in and of themselves are more so just stationary. I think that's my primary biggest concern, and I hope it's not the case. I hope they add a couple bosses that either adhere to old traditional tanking methods, such as toughness tanking, or they try something new, like whoever taunts the boss the longest is the tank. There could be some fun and interesting ideas there, but I want them to continue to push the experience of endgame content and really shake it up in terms of how a group of players interacts with not only the boss, but the arena itself. And that was I think that was my biggest and primary concern, or just observation of how the endgame has been going in recent years. Now, aside from this, there's also the topic of, with power creep and the approach of accessibility and the Emboldened mode, which is a raid mode which will increase your player's stats so you don't have as much of a difficult time in those encounters. I'm interested to see the players' overall reaction and perception to this content in a more modern era after so many years of it not really being introduced into the game. I hope that more people understand that it's not so much about the min-maxing of DPS numbers and having to have everything so perfect. It can certainly help, and I guess we don't know what the mechanics of these raids will be, but something is telling me that they're not going to be absolutely world-ending in terms of their difficulty, and I think that ArenaNet knows that they want players to get into these systems. They want players to interact with them. So I'm hoping that with the Emboldened system, with just more years of players interacting with endgame content, and more years of balancing and tuning what the class numbers are, my hope is that this 8th Raid Wing will actually be fairly approachable for most players. Oh, there's another topic at hand which falls under the umbrella of accessibility and the quote-unquote story mode or easy mode of these raids, but that the idea of convergences, 25 to 50 players in an instance fighting bosses, it seems that they're going to take that idea, that formation and number of players, and transfer them to raids as another possible mode for players to interact with, where you can have more than 10 players. However many players, I don't know at this time, but there will be more players able to interact with these systems and perhaps make it more of a story mode, or perhaps a more approachable, easy mode, so that people who want to experience the story but not necessarily the difficulty of like a challenge mode or even a normal mode can still venture off into these areas, experience that story of that raid, and overall maybe get some loot along the way. And I think that is a beautiful idea and a beautiful integration into that system. Now, if this system is also going to come to the other raids would be really interesting. At this time of me recording, I do not know, but I think that'd be a really cool system to introduce to things like Veil Guardian, the other wings, like Wing 1, 2, all of the other Wing 1 through 7 raids, so that you can go in with more than 10 players, alleviate some of that pressure of either DPSing or healing, or not having enough people to really spread to do mechanics, where it's much more razor sharp in terms of timing. The more players, the more comfort people might have in these raids. So at the end of the day, most people want to play a game to enjoy it, and we all enjoy it at different levels of difficulty. And if players want to get together to do easy mode or more of a story mode, I'd say power to them. Let them enjoy it. So I would love to see this feature be introduced to the other raids, if that is at all possible. Now, on the topic of raids, I think my next natural question or pathway that I usually go down when thinking about endgame content is looking for group, and looking for raid, and group finders. Guild Wars 2 is the only MMO that I really know of and play that does not have a traditional matchmaking system for content such as dungeons or raids. And we have various others, but even then, we don't have any matchmaking for convergences or 50-player instance content, regular story dungeons, fractal dungeons, strike missions, and certainly not raids. Our LFG system is more of a bulletin board that people will self-elect to post, and then others will sign up. And it works. For what it is looking to do, it most certainly works. However, there is something so special and something so safe about having a automated looking for group system, a looking for raid system, a matchmaking system. Now, how they would go about doing that is maybe a little bit trickier due to the various conditions that Guild Wars 2 has to face in terms of providing specific boons, and those boons are across both healers and damage dealers, so who is going to get that? Maybe a little bit trickier. The potential difficulty of finding proper skill level. Do you take the gear score? Do you take the gear that someone is using to better matchmake them? Do you just leave matchmaking systems to the quote-unquote easier modes of these systems? I would hope at some point they think about doing a more proper looking for group system with a more substantial matchmaking system that is reliable and takes things into account like players' gear and perhaps players' builds, and also what role they are going to elect themselves at being. Those are really my ideas and topics around the 8th raid wing for Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds. I think it's so exciting that we're getting another raid wing. It's huge, it's big. As to what it is, I'm actually not sure, but just knowing that it's coming is awesome. My only concern would probably be the way in which we interact with the bosses and how dynamic they feel. And also the potential need for a more adequate looking for group system. I think a looking for group system would carry them not only in raids, but in dungeons, story dungeons, fractal dungeons, strike missions, and even having a looking for group system for things like convergences or Battle for Lion's Arch, these larger scale 50-player instances where you are going and doing so many things with so many people. And also it would allow them to maybe have a more in-game version of a meta timer so people can track when things are gonna pop, and that would be nice. But I'm super excited to get back into some endgame content that is not just one strike mission boss. I think those are still going to be great primers, but to have something where you can go through a raid wing, have that cohesive storyline with the bosses, with the environment, and keep into that momentum and have new rewards and skins. It's gonna be so good. So good. Comment down below what you have to say and what you're currently feeling and thinking when it comes to Raid Wing number 8. And these other systems, such as looking for groups, strike missions, fractals, how people approach endgame. How do you think they approach endgame in this current moment of Guild Wars 2's life? Those have been my thoughts with Raid Wing number 8. Once again, down below in my description, you can use my link to pre-purchase Guild Wars 2 Janthir Wilds, get some exclusive items and skins, and secure your spot in the Isles of Janthir, and eventually take on Raid Wing number 8. You can also like, comment, and subscribe to help support me and the channel. It really helps me out, thank you so much. And we will catch you all in the next video. Bye everyone!